there's something conflict. The assignment of the classroom just paper. But anyway, so registrar office assigned this room to us, so we are the primary. Okay, so today we are going to talk about the main solution of the big data. Last week we discussed about what is the big data. So big data is really big data. It cannot be managed or processed by the legacy system. So there has been a lot of solutions. Not a lot of, but we had a solution like the distributed system and some the programming, such as the MPI, the solution, but they cannot address the current issue of the big data, size of the big data. So to address such a problem, so nowadays, as you can see, probably this is the main reason why you are taking this course to see the current solution of the big data. So that is the Hadoop. So today I'm going to introduce what is the Hadoop and what is the component of the Hadoop and their ecosystem. Then from next week we are going to learn each of them, the details throughout the semester. Anyone who never heard about the Hadoop? It's the first time, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so that's the reason you are taking this course. And those who already heard about the Hadoop, what is the meaning of a Hadoop? So this one.
It's a work environment?
This one. It's the name of this. Okay. Actually, if you already read the first reading assignment regarding to the Google file system, I briefly introduced what is the Google file system, the early 2000 when the Google encountered the problem of the big data. So they tried to address such a problem by developing the new file system, which is basically the distributed file system. So if you read the reading assignment, you probably understand the basic concept of the Google file system. Then one of the project manager of that Google file system is the coding, and his son has the toy like this one, and named the Hadoop. So he named such a file. Actually, after Google released the Google file system to the public, how can we release such an idea or implementation? Publishing the paper. So Google file system published the paper. That is actually the reading assignment. So even though that is the more than 10 years old paper, I think that's worthwhile to read, and it's one of the best paper in the distributed system and distributed file system. Not only just understanding the Google file system, but also you can get the idea of how to write the technical paper. So please try to learn what is the technical paper, how to write, and this kind of where made the publication. So then after the Google released the Google file system to the public, and he and many of the engineers quit the job. Then actually they found Apache, the Hadoop is accepted to the Apache Foundation for the open source project. Then they named the Google file system as the Hadoop, the entire project. So, for example, the Hadoop the distributed file system is one of the components of the Hadoop project, and MapReduce is one of them, Spark is one of them. So we will see such a component of the Hadoop project. So Hadoop is kind of the name of the collection of the project. Okay, so, or sometimes it's called the solution of the big data, the management and the processing. So we will see what is a Hadoop and what other component we usually call this the ecosystem. So such a component, the name after sometimes they name such a component as the animal name or sometimes a weird name. So sometimes it's called the kind of the ecosystem, and even there's a zookeeper. So I will introduce such a component of the Hadoop ecosystem also using the Prezi. It's an old version of the Hadoop introduction, but it's one of the, I think, the easiest document or presentation to understand what is a Hadoop for the beginner. So it's not very technical, the presentation, so you can get the overview. I'm going to start to introduce the Hadoop with the Prezi. Actually, it's interesting. Several years ago, somebody believed the Prezi will replace the Microsoft PowerPoint presentation file. But suddenly, the Prezi is not. It's almost gone. Is there anyone who uses the Prezi nowadays? Not much. But a couple of years ago, or 2-3 years ago, it was kind of the hot topic in IT and academia. So some of the professors use their lecture note with the Prezi, but nowadays nobody uses. But it's kind of the animation style, so it's easy to. So just relax and sit back, see what is the Hadoop and their ecosystem. So in this Prezi, I'd like to introduce what is the Hadoop ecosystem and some use case. We already talked about what is big data last week. So then, what is big data? Big data is big data, as we discussed last time, not just a terabyte or a petabyte size. Nowadays it's exabyte. So we defined what characteristic of such a big data using V, the 3V volume, velocity, and variety, and there are several things. Okay, so we already discussed. Then these two address such a problem of the big data. This is a solution. So we are going to use the Hadoop as a solution of the big data throughout the semester. Okay, so that basically consists of the number of projects, small projects. Sometimes it's called a component. Overall, this is called the Hadoop ecosystem. The main part of such a Hadoop is the two parts. One is it's not here, the file system. Another one is the programming. Nowadays, there are more the programming process. I will introduce more details. So before we start, this is the brief history of such a Hadoop solution. Actually, it is start from not the project in the Google to address the problem of the big data with the coding. Okay. And finally, 2004, the Google developed. Before that, definitely they finished the development and they released. Surprisingly, it is not user for commercial or such a company industry to release their work to the public. Okay, but Google at the time decided to open their source and publish their work. It's the two main parts. One is the Google file system. Another one is the map reducer. Both of them are directly adapted to the Apache foundation, the project that will be the Hadoop project. So this one will be the Hadoop distributed file system. This one is going to the map reducer programming. Okay, so then the Yahoo is after the Google released the source for the GFS and the MapReduce, the other user or the other company who had the same problem of what Google had, big data problem, they really like it's kind of the light to find the direction. So even the Yahoo and the Facebook and most of the internet company, they decide to use or even develop by themselves based on the existing source code. They develop a new product or the new solution, new component. After that, for example, Yahoo decide to use the Hadoop cluster. So somebody criticize Hadoop is really the solution for future. But if you see the list of the use case, if you can go to the, you can search the Google, you can do the Googling with the Hadoop or the use case or the Hadoop solution or the company. The most of the company that you know, they are using the Hadoop as the big data solution. So Yahoo decide to use quickly adapt the Hadoop cluster. No matter, even though the Yahoo is not currently very active. Actually, Yahoo is that they do not lose the money a lot. Okay, Yahoo actually has the stock for the other company. Yahoo itself actually they don't lose anyway. So and Facebook also used the Hadoop, and they developed their own interface or the programming solution or something data storage like the Hdfs based on the GFS. It's not flexible. Then they decide to develop the other data store which are based on the Hadoop. Okay. Then the Cloudera is a little bit different from the other. Like for example, Facebook, Yahoo, they adapt the Hadoop solution to address the directly problem of the big data. But the Cloudera is the company who provide big data solution. Okay, so there are many companies like the Cloudera, the Hortonworks, and many other. So Cloudera is one of the company. So they are not the open source company. They are the commercial company. If you want to use the Cloudera solution, you need to pay. But so it's like we have the open source. They are free, but I don't know how to use. And sometimes because it's open source, so in case something the problem, who solved that problem? Who can help? So Cloudera is in charge of based on the free source, free application. They have the kind of management the solution by combining, integrating existing source code. Then if I purchase such a Cloudera manager, then I don't have to pay I'm going to use the Hadoop, I'm going to use the school and many other open source. I don't have to pay, but I need to pay for this Cloudera manager and for kind of service fee. Then they are in charge of that. And also, so such a Cloudera or the Hortonworks, they provide the education, the product, including the virtual machine. So I decide to use the Cloudera, the virtual machine for the exercise lab. But inside, somebody do I need to use? No, you don't have to use Cloudera. You can directly install your own Hadoop for exercise lab if you want. It's not very difficult. So, for example, the Cloudera is even easier to manage the Hadoop solution. For example, if you download and install, so I have for example, the 100 node, but I do not know how to configure. You can download directly the Hadoop solution, then install the configure. I'm going to use this one as the naming node, the data node, the 100, and some of them I use. You need to manually configure. Sometimes you are not sure whether this is really correct configuration. It's a trial and error. However, if you decide to use such the big data solution, the Cloudera, for example, CDH, then if you download and install the CDH and check all the resource, and what is the network speed, and what is the computing power, like the CPU, and how many CPU, and what is the memory size, then automatically decide that this will be the best solution for the master node. And you need using this master node, you can do the 50, the cluster system, data node, the processing node. Okay, that is the best. So automatically assign, and you can have the 3, the replica. That's the best is suggest by analyzing the research. That is the benefit of using the Cloudera, but you don't have to. If you want to prototype or practice, so you don't have the current version is a CDH file. So, what is a Hadoop? Hadoop is a big data solution that consists of the mainly two parts. One is the file system. What is a file system? In operating system, if you, anyone who took the operating system last semester, what was the project? Second project.
Oh, I didn't know.
You didn't, so you undergraduate. What was the second project on the operating system? Portable file system. So what was the main objective of the portable file system? We are going to implement simple file system. This is the one of the component of the operating system to manage what? Number of files. So when we have any information in our computer system will be stored and managed by what? The file. Everything will be file. Like I connect the USB device. Operating system recognize your device as the file. It's just nothing but file. Like the /dv and something HDA or the USB, like that. It's as a file. Okay? Then problem, we have the number of files. So too many files to search the file or the delete the file or the open the file. It takes a long time. So we try to use something software that can manage the number of files using mainly what? Directory or folder. We can group. Not just one level, it can be multiple levels. Sometimes we can link, and then finally we can have the directory file system that you are currently using. Okay? Then, however, how many different file systems are you using in your operating system? Just one? NTFS? Actually not. So whether or not you realize the operating system use a lot of file systems, such as sometimes it's a temporary file system. Some of them are processed. Even the operating system manages the number of processes as a file. So you can manage such a file as this is something different. So process file system, or the swap file system, or the other file system. There are different the file systems. So we are going to create my own file system. Then that is running on top of existing file system, like I'm using NTFS. Okay? So visually it has the root, and under the root number, like the DV and the HDD, and this one is USR, so on. So the lib is USR lib. It's a directory. Okay? So it is based on the NTFS. Then I try to create my own file system under lib. As the file name is the A.pfs, personal file system. So this is from the NTFS point of view, this is nothing but a file. Okay? However, inside this is 10 megabyte. Inside the 10 megabyte file, I'm going to implement such a small file system for what? To manage the file. Okay? So how do you implement? So this is running on top of existing file system, which means from this point of view, this is a file, but this one is the alone is a file system. So we can create the file how? Upload. Okay, copy a.txt file from the NTFS to the inside the PFS file. That's what you implemented. So if you already took the operating system, this is what you did in your project. Okay, so HDFS is exactly same concept, 99.99 same concept. It's a new file system, but it's not directly the running or the create based on the hardware. Instead, it's an existing file system like the Hdfs or the ext, the 3, 5, 8, such a existing file system. On top of the existing file system, we are going to create a new file system. But the one different thing is, this one is distributed. Because one of the main idea how to address the problem of the big data is distribute, divide and conquer, okay, along the number of computers. So there is another computer node that has the file system, then create Hdfs. So this is the Hdfs file system, and another computer and Hdfs. So for example, I'd like to create a big file. I have the really big file, 1 terabyte file as a log file here. If you want to manage such a big file using the Hadoop system, you can upload this file to the Hdfs. But at that time, probably it will be not just one file system, divide. This one is go to here, this one is go to here, this one will be goes to here. It's a distributed. Okay? So this is the Hadoop file system. Basic idea is the distributed, but not just the distributed. We had such a distributed file system before. But the problem is, what is the main problem of such a distributed system?
Access redundancy.
All of them are the problem. One of the main problem is, what if? It's a fail. Fail means not just this node is crashed, but mostly what? Network failure. Okay, because the idea of the distribution is if they are not connected, no way. It's not distribution, it's isolated. Okay? They are connected by the network. Okay? Most of the failure is the network failure. So node failure, yes, is one of them. And the network failure is most popular. And another failure is the file itself. Sometimes the corrupted, the block, and so on. So in case of the failure, we need to recover. It's a fault tolerance. Fault tolerance is one of the issues. That it should be scalable. So in terms of the characteristic of the distributed system, traditional system is not working very well. It's the high overhead and not easy to use. Even processing time is not the scalable. It's more complex. Sometimes the performance will be degraded, the downgrade. So Hadoop addressed such a problem. We will see details how to do that. That is one part. So Hadoop file system. This is a file system, like this one. Plus, once we distribute the data, eventually we'd like to process the data, right? We don't want to just save, archive the file. Instead, we'd like to access and process the data. At that time, we had a solution before, such as parallel programming. Is there anyone who took the parallel programming class? I think the Oshif, the Professor Mount, offered the parallel programming a couple of years ago for the multi-core programming and so on. So, what is the main idea of the distributed parallel programming? It's also divide and conquer. If you can divide the job, okay? So I have 1, 2, 3, 10 computer. If you can divide your job, your application program by 10, we can get the benefit of the parallel processing, which means you need to design very, very carefully your program. Or, so I have the same algorithm to be running on each node, then but I distribute the data. So it's just a plus, same algorithm, same program, okay? But my data is distributed. At the time, what is the most important thing? You need to balance, okay? If data is skewed, it takes this one takes a long time, the other quickly finish it. But you cannot get the benefit because it takes a long time. Balance. And also, synchronizing, in other words, you need to sometimes combine. Okay? I have the summation, sum of the data here. Another sum. You need to combine. So it will be very, very complicated unless your processing, your algorithm is uniformly isolated. It will be very, very complicated. So such a parallel programming we had, but not very reliable. So to address that problem, Google proposed the idea of the map reduce. Map reduce, you can quickly imagine it. So for example, once we distribute the data, we can process. This is called the mapping. Map the job to the distributed data. And combine, reduce, concatenate the result. Not just one, sometimes you can do the several times, mapping and concatenate. Mapping, concatenate. This is a map reduce. It's a programming the framework. This is the programming framework. So that is the version. Yes. So that is the two main parts. So when we are talking about when we mention the Hadoop means basically one file system. Another one is the map reduce. This is the file system. It's not operating system. It's a part of the operating system. So do not imagine this is like the NTFS. This is like the UFS. This is like the NFS. That follow the POSIX, the standard. If you took the operating system, POSIX is the kind of standard. The IEEE standard of the operating system. It defines the most of the component of the general operating system. However, this Hdfs is not like the general solution of the file system. It's a specialized for big data and very, very simplified because it deals with the big data. So taking out a lot of small things, like for example, in the general file system, it has a link. Do you remember the link? Basically, it's the graph, the tree structure from the root graph structure. Root, the tree. Okay, one level, multi-level, but it can be eventually directed graph like this one can be pointed this. How? Using the link. Okay, like for example, but for example, Hdfs does not have such a thing. Okay, so do not imagine, even though we are saying this is a file system, it's not general solution of the file system. It's very specialized for the big data. And also, we can easily remove the file using directory structure. If you remember that, each one has we manage the directory, manage the file information, so we can easily search the file, whether delete the file, and so on. Hadoop file system, mostly read. Write once and read a lot of time. It's a specialized file system. Okay. So then, the map reducer is the kind of programming framework, okay, to utilize the benefit of the distributed file, distributed data. For what? To process big data. Okay, so that is the, and also another interesting is the Hadoop and this one, plus many other most of the such a Hadoop component solution is based on the Java. So they decide, the Hadoop group decide to use the Java. Why? Why they select the Java for the to implement such the solution of the big data Hadoop?
Platform independent?
Yes. So that is the most thing, because if your program, your software is the dedicated for the specific the hardware, so it will be probably expensive. But if it's the platform independent or the architecture independent, like the Java virtual machine, then we can use the HP computer. But this one is, I don't know what kind of the computer. So you can use any the computing resource as long as they have the Java virtual machine. So because of that, they decide to use the Java virtual machine. So for example, MapReduce is an entirely Java program. But if you have the experience like the compile the Java at least one time, you can easily understand. It doesn't require high level of the object-oriented programming. It's mostly standardized. The more important thing is the logic, how to map and reduce. So more the design the problem. So we will see the MapReduce, but nowadays still many of the developers are struggling from the implementing such a big data solution using the Java MapReduce programming. So nowadays is changing into the other programming framework, which is called, I will introduce later, the Spark. So, and many others, but the Spark is nowadays the most popular programming framework. Even Spark is not only for the Hdfs, even though that is the one of the Hadoop project, but it can be based on your file system, local file system. It can be based on the Hadoop. It can be based on the existing data source, like the relational database or the other NoSQL databases. If you do not know what is a NoSQL database, don't worry, we will see very briefly about the NoSQL maybe 1 week, the middle of semester. And another one is the low cost. So most of the such traditional legacy distributed systems are very, very expensive. Not only in terms of money, it's also expensive, but the effort are very, very expensive. It's very hard. But there's a low cost, and most of them are the open source. So these are the incomplete list of the characteristics of the Hadoop. That's I already explained. Okay. So this is the Hdfs the architecture. I will explain more details. But as you can see, the first thing you can realize is the master and slave structure. Many of the distributed systems adapt such a master and slave. That makes sense if we do not have such a master, like the MPP machine. MPP machine is the independent, each node, which means user should be fully in charge of the distribution. It will be